Hey, Sarah.
Hey. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, Jackie. Do you want me to help with the waiting room? Or
Yes, I just made you a co-host.
Okay. All right, cool.
Thanks.
I'm on it.
All right, thank you.
I'll be right back, Sarah. I just gotta grab something.
Hey, John, do you want the ability to record?
Yes, please.
All right.
Thank
There you go.
Hi, Sarah, I'm going to dial in from my landline just to make sure I have good audio.
Okay.
When I do, can you change it because it's my home number? I don't want it up there.
Yep.
Okay, I'll dial in now.
Okay.
Hi, Jen.
Hi, Dr. Bucky. It's nice to see you.
Hi, John.
Gonna have to pick a better spot. I'm on the move.
Hi, John.
It's Nice to see you.
It's good to be seen.
Sarah, is that you, 0305?
0305, yep. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Sarah. It's David under guest.
Okay.
You can
Oh,
just-
David,
wanna-
you're,
Yeah, if you want to right click and change the name.
sounds good.
I'm using a different laptop this evening, so.
Hi, Bill.
Perfect.
Hey, Bill.
Bill, you should have co-host abilities now.
Okey doke. Thank you.
Well, if any of you can hear, that's Abbott Hall in the background. It's 7 o'clock. The bells are ringing.
I always find it so bizarre that at the beginning of these Zoom meetings, we all sit here silently looking at each other. Versus if we were at a table, we'd be able to, chat. It's true.
Yep. Just another way that Zoom is odd and exhausting.
Don't worry, Sarah. Once I'm talking for 10 minutes, everyone will fall asleep probably.
Never, Bill. Today does feel like the longest day in history, though.
I was going to sing a song, but I didn't want to upstage Bill on his big night. So I'll just sit here quietly staring at everyone.
I don't know, John. Now that you've thrown it out there, you may have to pay up and show us.
I was under the impression that you guys were going to do a duet.
I
No,
thought
that's not happening.
Tonight just got a whole lot more interesting.
I am recording this, remember.
It's a good thing someone is, John.
Bill, I've still got quite a few people entering, so if you don't mind, we'll give it a few more minutes.
Sure.
I think Hello Goodbye by the Beatles would make sense.
Fair warning, if my screen goes blank, it's been a rare day for my children today, so. I'm hoping we stay on target.
Wow.
Rachel. All right, Bill, I've still got people kind of trickling in here and there.
Someone just said, "Hey, Rachel."
I think it's Rachel's face on there.
Should I open the meeting or do you want to give it another couple of minutes? Open him. All right. I will call the Marblehead School Committee public hearing on proposed FY21 school budget to order at 7:06 p.m. Bill has a presentation that he's ready to share with us. So Bill, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. And good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. For tonight's public hearing on the FY21 School Committee proposed budget, we'll be providing an explanation of this budget. First, we'll start with a review of the FY21 budget goals and priorities. We'll then move to speak to the logistics of developing this budget. We'll review enrollment numbers, number of K-6 class sections that are needed for the 2021 school year. And then after that, we'll get into more specific details of the proposed budget. These details will be presented and will be presented in alignment with the budget goals that I will review in just a second. And finally, we'll shift to and review of where we've ended up over this extra long process. What I'd like to do in presenting, in making tonight's presentation, is to go through the entire presentation without stopping for questions. And so as we go through, if you would, if you see a slide, if you hear me say something that causes you to have a question or a comment, just make a note of that. Sarah, I think what we're asking people to do is if after the presentation you have a question or a comment, to go to the chat and let Sarah know that you'd like to do so. And once the presentation is complete, we'll go to the chat and we'll just go in order.
Yes, correct.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
The presentation. Okay. Hold on one sec. Here we go. All right. So there are a number of goals and priorities that were identified for the development of the FY21 school committee budget. The first goal is and priorities, typically a standard priority of any budget, is to meet the contractual obligations of the collective bargaining units and to make sure that there's money in the budgets for those obligations. A second goal, which is really a follow-up from a process that was started a year ago in developing the FY20 budget. The goal was to reorganize the central administration staffing. In doing that, we have, for FY20, we did not fund the Human Resource Director's position, and we also did not fund the Director of Operations and Technology position. And then we're also looking to restore full funding of the Assistant Superintendent's position that was temporarily reduced in FY20 with the retirement of the former Assistant Superintendent, Brad Smith. In terms of the the Human Resource Director's position and the Director of Operations, we're formalizing what we did in FY20 because we believe that given the size of the district, given the qualities and the skill sets of the individuals that will be forming, for all intents and purposes, the new administrative team, it was felt that this was a move that made sense so that the resources that would have gone to these two positions can now go to other important needs that the district has. Major goal for this year's budget is to manage special education tuition and transportation services to full funding. What this budget does is provide funding for all known out-of-district tuition placements, and we've developed a protocol and procedure for not only identifying not just all known, but a list of potential students who may be placed out of district. That has been developed, that was developed at the beginning of the year, and that has been monitored regularly by our special student services director, Eric Oxford, as well as other central office administrative staff. Our goal was to look at alternative transportation options to realize cost savings for special education transportation. And this certainly is something we were able to achieve. And along with this, we also wanted to be able to clearly define special education, early education, staff management roles with the ultimate goal or overall goal of increasing efficiencies, communication, and practices in these two areas. So this is important in my opinion. Special education, of course, is a major component of not just Marblehead's school budget, but any school budget. The goal of curriculum and student support is to ensure, and in this case, with the focus on K-6 math and science curriculum, is to make sure that we're providing equitable access to the curriculum across all grade level classrooms, so that, you know, a student in one class section in grade 2 at the Glover School has access to the same curriculum, and in this case, and equally as important, access to the same supplies and materials for that curriculum area. And that is there's been a deficit there in K-6 math and science, in science for a couple of years, and in math just this year. So this budget will propose to do just that. It will also provide, so it will provide for to complete the purchase of all of the necessary elementary classroom science kit modules, provides for the necessary funding for the annual replenishment of the science kit materials. And in terms of math, it provides the necessary funding for Go Math consumables and most importantly, for online access that under our 2012 Go Math version is no longer available. And then it also funds, proposed to fund a curriculum coach at the village school. In terms of equity and improved access for student support services, one of the concerns that we had identified was, again, having students having access to the same services, in this case, both at the Coffin and in the Glover School. Currently at the Coffin School, there is a full-time school psychologist and a full-time guidance counselor. At the Glover School, there are two full-time, there's a full-time school psychologist and a 0.8 FTE school psychologist that is, whose office is at the Glover School, but she provides testing assessments for the district at the elementary level and at times at other levels, but does not provide services to students. So the school psychologist takes on both roles as the guidance counselor and school psychologist, and we're not quite meeting the needs of all of our students. So by funding a full-time guidance counselor position at Glover School, we can both increase the services necessary there and maintain an equitable level of services across those grade levels in those two schools. And in addition, and I am having just a little difficulty seeing the slides because of the chat is getting in the way. Sorry about that. Whoops. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay. hold on, I have some technical difficulties I'm dealing with here. I can't get my slide to move, so just bear with me. I'm so sorry. Here we go. So one of our final goals for the FY21 budget is related to facilities maintenance. Facilities maintenance, both in terms of supplies, materials, repairs, and costs for utilities, appear to have been underfunded in previous years. So this budget, based on a review that Michelle Cresta did of our previous year's utility cost, as well as last year's total utility cost, and then taking that and factoring in what the town's utilities reserve provides, provided there was a need to increase our utilities budget, as well as our supplies and materials budgets and repairs based on, again, previous year's experience. So some of the details about creating the budget, the goals and priorities are discussed sometime in the fall. They're shared with the school committee, they're discussed internally, and then presented prior to the unveiling of the proposed budget. And the same is done with the budget calendar. For this year, we had an excellent plan. We had an excellent calendar in place. These two slides show you that there was budget activity and budget meetings going on from January right through the end of March and into the beginning of April. We all are aware, of course, had school closures not occurred, had the COVID-19 pandemic not come forward, then we would have been actually doing this presentation on Monday, March 30th. That was the plan for the original budget. What has happened since then, however, is there have been many, many more meetings since April 2nd, or actually since March 19th. Actually, I misspoke. We would have been doing this presentation on March 23rd. Since March 23rd, there have been numerous school committees meetings, I think 5 or 6, in which the budget has been discussed. The budget was reviewed and updated and discussed at every school committee meeting since then. There have been a minimum of 4 or 5, I think it was 5 school committee budget subcommittee meetings to continually monitor and review our progress. And there have been at least 3 liaison meetings. So the liaison meetings are a subgroup of the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, and the school committee that have been meeting regularly to share notes and discuss the ongoing developments related to the FY21 budget. These meetings have become more important over the last 10 to 11 weeks as the pandemic has clearly required us to make a sea change shift in our budget thinking, certainly at the town, across the town. So when we began the school budget process back in January, and it was first presented to the school committee, I talked about the budget development process and then the process leading through to approval I've always seen it as an iterative process, a process that is continuously evolving as new information about the budget goals or budget assumptions and budget parameters, as new information becomes available. And as new information becomes available, I've always believed that if it's prior to the budget approval process or submission of the budget to town meeting after final review, that we need to make the appropriate adjustments. And usually those kinds of adjustments occur, certainly in my experience, in special education and oftentimes in staffing levels, because you sometimes have changes in staffing that you didn't know about at the beginning of the process. And as that happens, I believe it's responsible to, as part of this process, to make the adjustments. Sometimes they're positive adjustments. Sometimes you learn information that requires the budget to be adjusted upward. And then what this takes is ongoing multiple reviews of the information of where you're at. As I indicated, adjusting for new information. And then you get from the original proposed budget to final approval process. And we are in the home stretch, I think, toward final approval. Just some information that has been shared with the school committee on a couple of occasions. Just a quick overview of enrollments. The top half of this spreadsheet provides an 8-year enrollment history, which ends with the bottom line in red of what the current school year enrollment is. I'm not going to go through all the numbers. You can take a look at these. And what you'll note is that our total enrollment for the 1920 year decreased by 35 students over the total enrollment from last year, the 18-19 school year. And that's from an October 1, 2018 date to an October 1, 2019 date. And I'm sure you've heard this before, but when looking at enrollment histories and then projections, districts very typically look at enrollment as of October 1st, because that's the official enrollment number that districts provide to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And the enrollment number as of October 1st is the enrollment number that all of Chapter 70 state aid, for example, is based on. So whatever state aid under normal circumstances we would have received for FY21, that state aid is based on our enrollment number, overall enrollment number of 2,967. And then as part of this, this is a spreadsheet that I've used for many years in all of the districts that I've worked in. And based on the survival cohort methodology, the bottom part of this enrollment chart projects out, based on that methodology, a projected enrollment for the next year by grade level. And then on the right-hand side, you can see it's in subgroup by different, by actually our school organization level. This isn't perfect. You know, if you look at the projections, all of the numbers that are in white below, you know, those are really placeholders. And so you constantly have to be looking at this, and you look at it every year. But the one thing that you'll find over a 5-year period is that the middle school and high school enrollments projections are all based on students that are in our schools right now. And again, using the specific methodology you can project your own enrollments. And we used this these enrollment numbers in yellow to make some assumptions for next year's budget. The other thing that we do, and this is done annually, is in developing the budget, we need to understand, especially at the elementary level, and in this case, the grade K-6 level, how many classroom sections would we be expected to staff? So we take the enrollment projections and we apply them to this chart. And very simply, as you can see here, as you may see, for the 2021 school year, we are projecting 88 first grade students. This is down from 113 students for this year. And so we can go from 6 to 5 sections. So there's a change there of -1. The kindergarten change, we're not really adding a section. We have been talking about and having a placeholder in case our numbers, became in very high. But our numbers at this point are holding. They're actually less than where we were at this point last year by about 12 to 15 students. So I think we're in good shape in kindergarten, but we will be losing a grade 1 section. And then again, the numbers shift in grades 3 from 155 this year to 111 next year. So we will have 2 less sections, but you'll notice that the opposite is the case in grade 4. So we have to add 2 sections. So in the end, this budget at the elementary level accounts for the reduction of 1 classroom teacher position. No one has lost their job, and through attrition and retirements and resignations, we have just made some transfers. So that's good news. And you'll notice that there are some bubbles that are going through these grades, and this will continue to happen for the next 3 or 4 years. So what that brought us to in terms of an FY21 proposed budget back on February 6th was the proposed budget of the $41,440,000. And I'm using my pointer to just highlight and circle that number. So I hope you can all see that. And then you see in this slide, you see the comparisons of the 2 major components of the budget between this year's February proposed budget and last year's approved budget. And you can see the differences in the dollar amounts. Now, the last 2 lines are important because they show budget numbers that are related to how the budget process has typically worked here in Marblehead. So our number of 41,440,961 consisted of the base budget from FY20, or that number. It wasn't just rolled over. The FY21 budget reflects many, many changes to or differences from the FY20 line item budget. However, the State of the Town meeting that was held at the end of January provided some insight into a budget number for FY21, and that would be the FY20 base number plus the cost of living adjustments and steps that are part of our collective bargaining contracts that we have with our employees. And the State of the Town address in January typically identifies a school committee target budget of, again, the previous year's budget number plus the cost of the COLA and steps. And when we rolled out our proposed budget in February, we were approximately $356,000 above that town target. And we'll talk more about that as we go forward. So let's look at some details of some of the major components that make up the $41 million budget. So as we've talked about, special education out of district placement costs are in fact a major component of the budget. And what this chart shows is we're not trying to confuse you by identifying and changing the names of the account names. We're not trying to confuse you, but one of the things that this does represent, in fact, is an effort in all of the work that we're doing for FY21 is where necessary and where appropriate, we are aligning our account names and even our account numbers to align with the DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education Department's chart of accounts. And it's important for us to do that and to align account numbers and account names as much as we possibly can, because that just makes all of our required end of the year reporting with DESE that much easier. And the more you can do of that, the more accurate your reporting will be. And so what this represents is just that change, but it doesn't change the makeup of the budget itself. So what you see here is our FY20 budget. This is the number that was budgeted into the line items last summer based on the information we knew at that time, compared to the FY21 request based on the known placement cost as of February 6th. And that, the end result was a $229,000 difference reduction over FY20. And that was in large part, or main part, because we had a couple of students who were aging out of our out-of-district programming. A next area is utilities and maintenance. And this slide just lays out our electricity and gas costs, what was budgeted in FY20, what we've budgeted in FY21 based on our review of actual costs. And again, one of our goals for building this budget was to make sure that we had accurate line items for representing or reflecting the actual cost of goods, services, based on previous years' history and previous years' actuals in this case. And as a result, we also have a maintenance and supply costs in the facilities area, burner repair, contracted services. So these are services that we contract with providers who come in. They do annual checkups, annual inspections, and then they're on call and provide services throughout the year when we need them. There's supplies and transportation repairs. So we have some old vehicles and we need to repair them to keep them on the road. Related to one of our other goals in terms of equitable access to the curriculum, we have budgeted $49,000 for our Go Math program. We learned at the middle of this year that our 2012 version of Go Math, the online component, which was a very robust part of our Go Math program at the elementary level, Houghton Mifflin, the publisher, was no longer going to support that as of 2020, as of December 2020. So we improvised a bit and were able to meet our needs for the rest of this school year, but they're not extending the use of that online component. So they did offer us an upgrade to the 2015 version, which only has a very short shelf life coming up as well. Our understanding is that that will be not supported within a couple of years. But in order to do that for a full year across all of our K-5 grades, that cost is $49,619. And so that's included in our budget. And as I expressed earlier, that provides the same opportunities for access to materials for all of our students at each of the different grade levels. Another major curriculum area in this regard is the elementary level is science. 2 or 3 years ago, the district implemented a new elementary science curriculum, grades K-5, and the initial purchase of classroom science kits or modules was able to be done out of some grant monies. Because of the first year of implementation, teachers were still experimenting with it. There were kits that were purchased that were shared among classrooms. And then after that, grant money seemed to dry up. I think last year there might have been a few kits purchased, but this, as we went through this year, there were not enough kits for every classroom to have a kit for each module at each grade level. And in order to implement this successfully and in the robust form that it should be, it's really difficult, especially when you have materials that are used up and have to be replenished, to be sharing the kits. So the goal for this year is to, for this budget for FY21, is to purchase all of the remaining science kits necessary for grades 1 through 5, so that each classroom has a kit for each module. And these 2 slides show the modules for the grades 1 to 5. So you can see that at the individual grade levels, some grades have 2 modules and some grades have 3. And so this budget, the proposed budget funds this. So for, curriculum in math and science at our K through 6 levels, the total amount funded is a little more than $76,000. In terms of student support services, positions that I talked about earlier, here are the dollar amounts that go along with them, and you can see that that this budget budgets for those. It ends up being the equivalent of 3 new FTEs: the grade 8, the curriculum coach, and the collaborative guidance counselor. The adjustment counselor and the student support tutor for the high school transition program, we call it the BRIGHT program. Those FTEs are in place this year, but they're funded by a grant. It was a 1-year grant to start this program. This program this is a program that that supports, gosh, I'm so sorry. So this is a program, it's a transition program. It's called the transition program because it supports students at the high school level who have been out of school for an extended period of time, either because of a physical injury, perhaps a concussion, perhaps a broken leg, perhaps something else, as well as students who are experiencing some social emotional issues, as well as students who may have some experiencing mental health issues. Excuse me. And so oftentimes, a number of these students are out there, they're home hospital tutored for a bit of time. And what the goal of this program is to ease them back into their classrooms by going through the transition program first. They work with the student support tutor who arranges all of the academic work from the classrooms that they're in to be done in the transition program. And then every student is different. The time they spend in the program is different. It could be anything from 1 to 4 to 7 weeks. And then our goal is to transform them, transition them fully back to the classroom. It's been a tremendous success this year at the high school. The high school team made a presentation to the school committee back at the end of February, and the results are really tremendous. And we see this as a very important program, and because the funding of the grant is dried up, it's important that we fund it through the budget. Excuse me. I'm almost done here, I hope. So again, this is where we were at to begin the year, and we thought that this was a really a good plan. As I talked about, we had an opportunity going through this iterative process. As new information became available, we made adjustments, and we're now at a point where, as of June 8th, we've made a number of adjustments to the budget based on that process. So since school closing, we all know that the budget landscape has changed for sure. For the last 11 weeks, we've continued to review the proposed budget. And when new information became available, we made the appropriate adjustments. The additional time that we've had since the beginning of April, if you think back to the calendar that I showed you, the additional time did allow for documenting changes to the budget that often do occur. So the changes that I'm going to show you that we've documented, oftentimes this happens. It happens in every school district. And depending on the timing of when your budget is approved and then submitted, under the normal process to go to town meeting, details change. Special education information changes, staffing information changes, for example. So we've made adjustments. And from the beginning of our process, going back to February, we've utilized what we've called the budget adjustment tracking sheet to monitor, document, and adjust the budget, as I've indicated, as new information is learned. And, that has, we followed that process, and that's taken us to where we are now. So as of June 8th, our FY21 budget and the proposed budget that will be moved forward is at $40,521,000. You can see that that's quite a far distance from the original proposed budget back in February of the $40,441,000. The difference is just about $900,000. The breakout is right there for you in salaries and expenses, and the difference between what is now the proposed FY21 budget and the approved FY20 budget is shown in those figures in red. So I just want to, we're almost at the end here. We want to just go through the budget adjustment tracking sheet, and the way this has been set up, we start with the initial presentation to the school committee. That's the budget number. And we develop this column called target gap. So that's the difference between what our proposed initial budget was and that state of the town number that came out at the end of January from the town side. We had a comprehensive budget workshop, school committee budget workshop. The school committee met with the leadership team and we reviewed in detail line items and major components of the budget, which I've shown you here in this presentation. And that was an important first step for the school committee in gaining a complete understanding of where the budget stood. That was followed very shortly after with the joint meeting of the liaisons group between the school committee, the finance committee, and the Board of Selectmen. This was an opportunity for the finance committee and Board of Selectmen to do an initial review and understanding of our proposed budget. And one of the things that came out of that meeting, which was a positive thing, there was some confusion about the what is called the energy threshold within a department's budget, and at what point of an expenditure level does that department then, does the utility reserve start paying the bills. So as a result of that, and based on what we had budgeted, which I talked about as part of our review, we had assumed a higher threshold spending limit. And so it was confirmed at that meeting that the threshold limit was actually $100,000 less. So that was the first adjustment we were able to make to the budget. And we're able to adjust it down, reduce it by $100,000. As we continue through the process, the rest of February into early May, as I indicated, we're constantly reviewing, monitoring the budget. We went back through, we looked at some of our assumptions around some reorganization we had done. And earlier this year, we had our school district, the district liaison position. That individual resigned, moved to Florida. So we combined that position with our ELL director's position. It was a good fit, met a lot of different needs in an administrative way. That's worked out really well. And so we had budgeted an ELL director's salary line, but we're able to adjust it because we're going to continue with that combined position. And then we also learned, based on a review that the special ed team leadership had been doing and projecting for services for next year, that there was a special ed teaching position at the vet school. There was a program position that, based on student needs, was no longer needed. So we're able to reduce that salary line there. So through the beginning of March, based on our continuous review and understanding of new information, we're able to adjust the budget downward again, and that gap between the schools and the town kept moving in that direction. And then about a few weeks later, at the last school committee meeting in March, again, based on new information, we March 1st is a deadline for teachers who are out on leave notifying the school district if they intend to come back. We had a kindergarten teacher resignation. She'd been out on leave, decided not to return. Her full salary was in the budget, and because we'll hire a replacement, we were able to make another adjustment. And then after a lot of research and work done on our special ed transportation cost, we've developed a model program for 2021. Our intention is to lease 2 special education vans, and we will be hiring part-time drivers who will drive those 2 vans. They will be transporting our students who require special education transportation in district. So they're students who go to specialized programs, our Marblehead students who go to specialized program in town, but also require special education transportation. So our in-district special ed transportation cost for FY20 was approximately $117,000. All in, this will realize a net savings of $45,000. So we made that adjustment. And with school closure, we continued to look at the budget. And at the first meeting in May with the school committee, we were able to adjust our out-of-district tuition account to reflect current obligations as of May 7th. There have been some changes in our out-of-district tuition. There have been a number of changes. There were some adds, there were some reductions. And then, so we took that savings and made the adjustment to the budget. And then we also learned that a high school teacher, special ed teacher, had decided to retire. So again, we took advantage of that. Now, I talked a little earlier about the extended time to continue to monitor this budget has allowed for us to document and make changes that typically we wouldn't have made because the budget would have already been passed at this time under normal circumstances. And then as we continued to go through the process of closing out the FY20 year and looking forward and making sure that our FY20 budget status was intact, we determined that we have a little more than approximately a $200,000 surplus for FY20. A number of different reasons for that. School closure certainly has contributed to that at that time, and that we have will have $200,000. There's actually, we anticipate a larger surplus than $200,000. Could be upwards of $425,000. $319,000 of that, or $314,000 of that, approximately is because of school closures. So certain expenses that we didn't have to pay. So in working with the budget liaisons group, there was consensus on, given that the budget, townwide budget is really feeling a lot of pressure. We plan to use $200,000 of the surplus to prepay allowable FY21 special education tuition. So there are certain, under the law allows a district to use, in this case, FY20 surplus funds to prepay certain special education tuition costs for FY21. So we will take advantage of that, and that reduces our budget to $40,698,000. The previous adjustments had reduced it even further. So at May 7th, we were at $186,000 less than what that original town target gap was. In addition, upon further review of our high school staffing in relation to the course selection process that happens at the high school, in working with Mr. Bauer, we were able to determine that at the high school level, the equivalent of 2.6 FTEs could be reduced because there just wasn't a demand for courses in a couple of different areas. We literally did not have the students to fill courses that these teachers would be teaching. Also put in the adjustment column is $43,000 for our top administrators who this would mean they would not receive a cost of living increase for FY21. And this is in line with what's happening on the town side. And then we also decided to not fund that FY21 village curriculum coach. You know, the budget pressures are one thing, but in the end, when we talked about this further with our new superintendent, and most especially in this case with our new assistant superintendent coming on board, our new assistant superintendent has a very, very strong skill set that is related to a number of the duties or based on the rationale to fund this village curriculum coach. And in the end, the feeling was that there are no other curriculum coaches currently in the district, and that there is a need for that kind of curriculum support throughout the district, and that we felt it was important for the new central office leadership team to really have the opportunity to understand what's in place here and then make their own decision in working with stakeholders about what that kind of a structure would look like. So in the end, that really made a lot of sense. And then finally, as we've gone through certainly the last 7 to 8 weeks, every time we've talked about the budget and as we've been thinking about what's coming in September, the school committee, had been supporting adding money into the budget to address unknown or not anticipated costs due to school reopening. And so we've added $134,699 to that. Just a couple more slides. So that brings us to the $40,521,000. Here's just some detailed information on the Marblehead High School FTE reductions. This explains that we have over the years, when there have been the need to open an additional section, rather than hire a part-time staff to teach those additional sections, those sections have been taken on by full-time teachers. So in essence, they become a 1.2 FTE teacher. And because they're taking on an additional teaching assignment under the collective bargaining agreement, they're entitled to be paid for that. So in reviewing Mr. Bauer, in reviewing his needs for a number of sections in social studies this year, it was found that there was not a need for these additional 0.8 or 4 additional class sections. The course selection numbers and sections needed to fully staff and meet the course request needs of the students support this. It does not and will not impact class size, and there are no courses that won't run because of this particular decision. And this, of course, doesn't result in any rifts or layoffs. One of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention, and if we went back to that enrollment slide, we'd see. So since the end of the FY18, end of the 18-19 school year, and then projected for September, the high school enrollment will have decreased by 76 students. So this all makes sense, and this is a time to take advantage of that. Similar issue is happening with visual arts. This current staffing level of 4.8 FTE. The course selection numbers and sections needed support the staffing of 3 full-time FTEs. And in this case, it sounds like a coincidence. It is not. It's just how it's happened. but we had a full-time teacher and a part-time teacher submit their resignations, letters of resignations back in March. They are moving on to do other things, but so again, this is a cut that does not impact RIFs or layoffs. So once again, to go back through this, our original draft budget proposed in February was the 41.4 million. It's now at 40.5 million. There's an adjustment from the original draft in February of an adjustment down of over $900,000, and an adjustment from the state of the town kind of target gap number, the Fy20 budget plus the cost of COLA and steps is down over $5,500. So when we've been able to reduce the budget, this is what our proposal, this is what our proposed budget is. And I did want to highlight that all of our original goals and what the original proposed budget was designed to support the educational program, if you will, for FY21, supports all of our goals with the exception of the curriculum coach and the administrative COLAs. So that's where we're at. And one last piece, and this is, there's a lot of unknowns. So FY21 school reopening unknowns, this is related to the monies that are proposed in the budget to address any unknown or unanticipated costs. Possible impacts of reopening and cost-related impacts. We're not sure what social distancing cost impacts will be. We do know that in our clerical areas, we're putting up transparent barriers. A lot of that work is being done this year. PPE costs, we know there'll be PPE requirements for any kind of school reopening. Many districts have unknown transportation costs. Given our transportation, how it works here, I'm not anticipating any large degree in change there, but we'll know better. We'll know more when guidance comes out. Cleaning and disinfectant supplies, student support. By student support, we mean what additional supports are students returning back to school going to have? What's the social emotional impact? What are the learning gaps that some students may have, as a result from school closures? And how will we go about helping students, overcome those gaps? Will there be programming? Will it be after school? Will it be on Saturday mornings? And will there be student support programs that happen during the day with some additional staff? Will staff be realigned? And then, of course, technology, given that I think it's likely a school reopening plan that is supposed to come out from DESE next week, the middle of next week, is calls for some students coming in to school, half the students coming in at one point, the other half, the next, maybe a week on, week off, not sure about that. But, will there be additional technology? And then others, there may be certainly other possible impacts. So funding sources, what sources are or may be available? So under the federal CARES, the government's CARES Act, CARES Act number 1 that was passed back in March, there's billions of dollars coming to Massachusetts for municipal governments to pay for COVID-19 related costs. The Marblehead share, we're told, is about $1.8 million. This is money that comes to the municipal side, comes right to the town. And the cost of PPE, we believe, is an eligible cost for use of this funds. So that would be a portion of the $1.8 million. For the last several weeks, the town side and school sides have been working cooperatively to identify PPE equipment, to identify vendors, and to put together, quantities of different PPE that we anticipate will be needed on the school and the town side. And at this point, there's been some conversations, but there's a sense that that this funding source will be able to pay for that. In addition, there's also CARES Act 1 funds coming right through to the schools, through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We're told that the funds will be distributed under the using the Title I formula, and we anticipate somewhere in the vicinity of $100,000. We could have applied for a portion of the funds for FY20, but there was no need. We didn't have, we could cover our expenses. That's about $10,000. And so we'll be applying for these funds for FY21. So $100,000 will be available that can help with additional student support to make up learning gaps, any additional services, social, emotional, mental health, or other types of learning services. That's a pool of money that's available for that. And then, as you saw, we have budgeted, we have a line item called COVID-19 unanticipated expenses for a little more than 100 or almost $136,000, and certainly would be available to pay for, other costs, which we're not aware of. And then in terms of district-wide technology, this proposed budget just does fund on the district-wide and about $20,000 that's dispersed amongst the schools, $162,000, almost $163,000 for the purchase to replace or provide new iPads, PCs, laptops, and Chromebooks. And there is been a replacement plan in place that the district has been following. However, given the circumstances we face, I believe it'll be helpful once we understand what the state reopening plan is and what the impacts of that plan will be to our districts. There may be technology needs, and I think that this is a pool of money that the district will be able to bring the stakeholders together and perhaps reprioritize, the equipment or other technology related costs that can be spent. So there is a pool of money there for that. It may look different than what the original intention was. And that's it. I'm sorry for going so long. And I think now is the time for questions or comments. Thank you.
Okay, so I will start from the top. And when I call on you, if you could unmute yourself and then state your name and an address, so for the record. So all I have is screen names, so some of them will be a little different. Joe Neal.
Jerry O'Neill, 18 Orchard Street. Sarah, you want me to read the question?
Sure, go ahead.
The question is regarding, early on in the presentation, you mentioned the elimination of the HR director and director of IT positions.
Yes.
I was wondering, for a district with, I believe, over 500 employees, and given the emphasis on remote learning technology in the fall, who's going to be leading the HR decisions, the employee training, things like that, without a HR director? And who do you expect will be leading the IT technology decisions?
Thank you for that question. So the position of IT, that position was actually the Technology and Operations Director. That was the title of that position. So that person oversaw technology and as well as facility and procurement responsibilities for the district. And in addition to that central office position, we also have in place, he supervised the director of facilities and also a director of technology. So when I came in last year in June, tasked with the job of taking a big budget number and making a line and fitting a line item budget into that, I had to look at a lot of different areas to make that budget work. And given that both of those positions have been vacated and they were vacant, it was decided to not fund those positions for this budget year. In terms of the technology and operations, what we did was I met with the director of technology and the director of facilities, and the director of technology took on the technology aspect of that job, and the director of facilities took on the facilities aspect of that job. Now, it's important to understand that as this was going on, we were also in the process of hiring a new director of finance. And the candidates that we were looking at, and the goal was to find someone who was experienced and who had experience in their job as previous job as the financial director, had the skill set to do the operations piece that the job that wasn't funded, that title of that position that wasn't funded. And that would be things like being certified to do all of the procurement, having experience overseeing food services from the central office perspective, as well as facilities. And in fact, we were fortunate to find such an individual and hire such an individual. The previous, in my opinion, the previous director of finance, she just didn't have that skill set. So this other position, took on those. So from that standpoint, we have a very capable person who will be taking the operations responsibilities. It's something that is more standard and more typical in school districts, much more than the structure that was in place here in Marblehead. And then there is the director of technology position. Our director of technology took on a few more responsibilities. We were able to hire a new network manager who has additional capabilities and skill sets. And and we expect that there'll be, our current director of technology is planning on retiring at the end of this year, and the new superintendent will have an opportunity to bring in a new director of technology. In terms of the HR position, that was something that for this year at least, I was able to take on the administrative functions of that position. Served many, many years as a superintendent in a couple of different districts that had, that served 4,000 to 4,500 to 700 to 800 students and 700 to 800 employees. And those districts were supported by an HR, specialist, executive assistant, who was well-versed in all of the procedures, paperwork, etc. And then the superintendent and the assistant superintendent took on some of the administrative aspects of that position. So that's something that we monitored this year. And, in terms of the HR position, we were able to hire an HR assistant who has the capability and capacity to fully support that position. And then the administrative aspect, the aspect of making administrative decisions will fall to both the superintendent, the director of finance, and the assistant superintendent will take on a small role in that area. So from the HR standpoint, I think it's doable, but the new team will really have to monitor that. From the operational standpoint, I think that's a very, very doable structural change.
Thank you, Bill. Let's see. Next up is Jeff St. George. Jeff, go ahead and unmute yourself. You said you have a facilities question.
Thanks, Sarah. Jeff St. George, 29 West Shore Drive. Bill, as you and many of the team know, my full-time job is in facilities management and facilities maintenance. And I just wanted to kind of understand the thought process behind the $136,000 COVID ad, and really understand what you guys believe is the financial impact to reentry. Obviously, I'm speaking to my clients every day about what this impact will be. And as you stated in your unknowns, there is a lot of them. So a couple things I want you to think about, if you haven't thought about it, if you have, great, is really what's the impact as we require on a cleaning perspective, as we require our cleaners to look more at a disinfecting procedures than a cleaning, moving away from slightly moving away from the sort of wipe down, dust, make shiny and smell good, to a more focused disinfectant on high touch points. Obviously, there's some significant impacts when it comes to the labor requirements. We will need cleaners in the building during the day focused on these high touch points of doorknobs and drinking fountains and locker doors and cafeterias and handrails. What's that financial impact and labor increase? Obviously, we'll still need to do the deep night cleaning of the classroom floors and the high dusting. What is the impact? And if we thought about the increased cost of disinfectants versus traditional cleaners, there's going to be a significant impact, probably about 25% of current cost for that disinfecting chemicals. You're also going to have to consider the increased usage of those disinfectant cleaners. Ideally, those high touch points are cleaned on the hour on a high traffic area. So think about the amount of material you're going to go through. And then in addition, what's the financial impact to training the existing staff? If we're moving away from a traditional kind of green-friendly cleaning to a more hospital-based or hospital-grade cleaning disinfectant, obviously our cleaners will need to be trained on how to properly use those, how to properly store those. So I really want to make sure that we understand the janitorial impact of COVID for reentry. And then also on the facility side, have we talked about or looked at air quality concerns? We're reentering schools that have been vacant. Not sure when the last preventive maintenance was done on the HVAC units, but CDC is going to recommend increased filters, increased change of filters in your air handling system. So just want to be sure that we're thinking about those things and how that will affect that budget. I'd like that we thought about the 136. I am concerned that there's not enough labor built into that number, as well as increase in supply costs. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. And, you know, we don't fully understand that right now, to be honest with you. But no, I know our director of facilities has been working on that. You know, in terms of training, that's an excellent observation. I know one of the things that Todd really does well is training. He's doing training a lot, but you know, the cost of supplies, you know, the cost of staff, we've been talking about that. We don't have a handle on that yet. And so I appreciate the comments, definitely. And you may be hearing from us, Jeff, in terms of
welcome the call.
Helping us with that. Thank you.
All right. Sarah Fox, we'll go back to the school committee after the public has a chance for questions. And Catherine Martin, you're up. If anybody, just a second, Katie, sorry. If anybody has a question to ask, please just put it into the chat, and then I'm going through them starting in order, and we'll get to you in a little bit. So Katie, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, so my first question, it relates to technology and thinking that we are going to be at least in a partial remote learning situation, and one of the goals being to provide equitable access to equitable and consistent access to curriculum. And I'm wondering if we can just talk about the cost for providing a kind of consistent remote learning technology package that would include hardware for all students and teachers, software and licenses, and specifically some sort of platform, not just Zoom, but there are educational platforms out there that do have like an interactive teaching methodology. I believe that Google Blackboard is one of them. And then the third piece would be having some training for the teachers so that they can use this technology and implement it, one, if we're on the 1 week on, 1 week off, but also if we have another extended leave, and then IT support for that. And I do see that we have $162,970 in the budget, and I think that's appreciated, but kind of looking, if we are out for a while, is that number going to carry 2,800 students and 500 staff if we do have to go remote again? And we know that, you know, this will be a large chunk of our school year for next year, potentially. Thank you.
I'm not sure where to start, Katie. Wasn't able to write all of that down. I think generally, let me just start from the back. So this is an issue that has the issue of technology platforms for remote learning, educational platforms. The state, the commissioner's office is doing some work on identifying different platforms. I know there's been a survey that went to superintendents, asking superintendents to respond and provide some information on what's being used in other districts. And he has a team that is, as I understand it, has been vetting some of these programs, so that we're anticipating that from a state perspective, from the commissioner's office, we'll receive some information on both costs and feedback on the you know, on how other districts felt these platforms met, you know, the needs of their students. You know, is the $162,000 enough? I don't know. And it will require, as the reopening plan becomes more evident, as the details of what that plan, you know, as it evolves and starts to finalize, I think that, you know, along with the facilities questions that were asked and the technology questions, you know, that'll all start to be identified and as well. But one of the things in terms of, in terms of both, now that I think about it, I want to be clear. In terms of the facilities issues brought up, and the cleaning in particular, as in the technology piece, the CARES money, and not just the, both the piece coming to the town and the piece coming to the schools. We know that on the town side that that money can also be used for supplies, additional cleaning supplies. It can be used for training, and it can also be used for additional staff needed for training. So I know that on the town side, Jason is working on compiling, a list. Todd Bloodgood, our director of facilities, has been working very closely with Jason and his staff, as has Michelle Crester, our finance director, on that. So that $1.8 million is part of the bucket that, with the town and schools collaborating, and it makes sense to collaborate on those kind of issues. We're hoping that those pieces will be, there'll be enough money to meet those pieces. In terms of training and moving to make sure that our remote learning plan next year is both more robust and in line with not just what is happening at home, but is aligned with and directly related, I believe, to what's happening when kids are in school, the portion of the time they're in school. So there's a lot of work that will have to be done on that as the plan gets finalized and developed in further detail. It's just right now, at this point in time, there's just a lot of questions that don't have answers to them.
Thank you, Bill. So you do think there's an opportunity then for us to grab more than 100,000 that's being allocated from the CARE money then to cover whether it be technology or cleaning?
Yeah, so right now the two buckets are the 100,000 that comes directly to the schools through DESE, and the 1.8 million that comes to the town through the Office of Administration and Finance, I believe, on the state level. And we've been engaged in conversation with Jason for a number of weeks now, anticipating that. The plan now is, that's the funding source that will provide the PPE. And there's also, the ability for the janitorial supplies. If we have to do training for that, that's eligible under those. So, it'll be based on, in the end, the the list of expenses that both the schools and the town side come up with. But we have a pretty high level of confidence that that's an amount of money that will help us considerably.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Katie. Mr. O'Neill, did you have another question?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Bill, last year's budget meeting that took place at the high school auditorium, there was a lot of discussion, if you recall, about budgeting and potentially doing an override, and it was decided at that time, or at least recommended by Ben Berman from FinCom, to work on an override next year after the new school budget was passed. And I'm wondering if there have been any progress in that. I could not find any meeting minutes, any budget subcommittees available.
Sure.
And I'm wondering if you were involved with that and if you have any feedback.
So I was not involved in town meeting last year or any of the meetings leading up to that. So I came on board after that, of course. Through the summer, I was brought up to speed on, on what the thinking was through that process, and the question of an override for the next year. And part of what I learned in going through that process, and then very early on, back in the late fall, when we started our budget development process, we started internally, of course, by meeting with principals and other individuals involved in putting together, department budgets, et cetera. And, started talking about, the needs that have been identified. And a couple of things became clear to me. There was concern raised last year, I know, by our principals. There was a proposed 20% cut, I believe it was, to supplies and materials, and principals were spoke to that, requesting that not be done. And when we first started to collect our budget information from principals this year for next year, I noticed that, the FY, we were able to, by the way, we were able to build this year's budget, the Fy20 budget, without reducing the school's supplies and materials budget by 20%. Actually, they were level funded from the FY19 year, the previous year. And when we were starting to look at the FY21 building-based budgets, which are, the majority are the supplies and materials and equipment needed for the individual schools, they were coming in at, at or slightly above, with the exception of the science and math items that I talked about earlier, at around the same level as FY20. And when we sat down and we talked about it, the principals, each and every one, stated the same story. And their story was that in previous years, they never really had the opportunity to fully expend those budgets because, at least for 3 years previously, maybe longer, but at least 3 years, early on in the school year, a budget freeze was put on. And so they weren't allowed to spend that money. And the message to me was loud and clear. If we're allowed to spend that money, we believe that's sufficient to meet our needs. So that was an important piece of information to learn. And that was shared as we rolled out, that information was shared as we rolled out the initial proposal. In terms of conversations about an override, as the school committee started to get deeply involved in their very important process in their very important role in the superintendent search process, and it was about the time we were starting to look at our budget goals and talk about next year. I made the observation that based on my 22 years of experience in many districts and in a number of cases going through the process of town overrides, and in particular operating overrides, which in my experience have been very difficult to pass, my observation was that you typically only have one bite at the apple, and if it doesn't work, it's a number of years before you have an opportunity, when people think the time is right to do that. And so my advice was to slow things down a little bit. There was going to be a brand new leadership team at the central office beginning in the FY21 year. The district's long-range strategic plan, 5-year plan, was ending with this school year. New superintendents very typically, come into a district with an entry plan that is that is well articulated, with the goal of speaking with as many stakeholders as possible to understand from staff, from parents, from community members, from public officials, from the administrative school committee, what's the best thing about our district and where are some areas that we could do better. And in that entry plan, he would go about that process, put together information, and that would form the basis of developing a new long-term strategic plan, a new vision, if you will, for the district. And in this case, with the team approach coming on board, I thought it was very important to allow the new administration some time to go through that process, develop a new, clearly articulated vision for the future, and based on that, develop what the needs of the district will be going forward. And that's when the town, in my opinion, and the school committee in particular, should be looking at
Bill?
an operating override. Yes, I'm sorry, I went on and on.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think I understand your position, and while I don't agree with everything you're saying, I understand what you're saying. But I guess let me get back to my original question, and maybe it's a question really for the school committee, as far as any discussions and minutes available around a potential override, because at least in my opinion, Bill, every minute counts, and you're asking the new administration to basically take upon a study while our rankings are decreasing, right, every year. So I feel like time is of the essence. And Sarah, I don't know if that's a question that you would like to address, but I was just wondering if there's been any progress on that from the school committee's perspective. Thank you.
So generally, this portion of the time is used for Bill to address questions, and then the school committee will be undertaking multiple points where we'll be discussing the information that has been laid out tonight and the feedback that we've gotten from the public. So I would encourage you to continue to stay tuned. We will discuss a little bit, most likely after this portion of the hearing tonight, and then we will continue to do so until we vote at our next regularly scheduled school committee meeting. Bill, did you have anything else that you wanted to address within that?
No.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Muffy Paquette.
Sorry, I had difficulty unmuting myself.
No worries.
So my name is Muffy Paquette, 44A Cloutman's Lane. And first, thank you to the school committee, and Bill, a special thank you to you. This has to be the hardest interim superintendent job ever. But I had a question about the $200,000 in the prepaid tuition. It's my understanding that, while I think prepaying is a great thing, that money then does not come back into the school budget. Is that correct? And if so, why?
No, we've had conversations about that. And so, in the end, that may very well have to come back to the school budget based on what the out-of-district tuition costs will be next year. It may be that full $200,000. It may be something less because of other changes. It may, in fact, be more because we have more students going out of district.
So is that dependent on your recommendation or the school committee's recommendation, or the town has complete jurisdiction of whether it comes back or not?
I think it's a I mean, from my perspective, it would be a combination of both. It would be the school committee and the town side working together. One of the things we've accomplished this year, not only in FY20 but FY21, we have full, as of this time, in key areas of special education utilities. In the past, those are areas where there's been a shortfall Special education is very, very difficult to do that. But I think we have a process in place now that over time, it will allow the school committee to provide an objective projection of, what that change is in special education between, the end of March when the budget is completed and where you stand on September 1 when school starts. There's usually a difference. And so after a few years, you average that out. So when you're building your budget in the future, you add that, that just becomes a part of your budget. So it protects you from those changes, those unanticipated changes that occur. But in the end, in terms of special education, when it comes time to creating next year's budget, whatever your costs are in special education for out-of-district tuition, you have to budget for them. So the money will have to come from somewhere.
Okay.
Thanks, Muffy. Meredith Tedford.
All right, I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
This is sort of a follow-up to the COVID question, and I appreciate the earlier gentleman kind of providing some insight, because I do kind of appreciate that this is kind of an unknown for everyone. But I think my question is a broader one, and it really speaks to sort of a general comment that I have as well. So my specific question is kind of, what went into that number, and if that number does end up being insufficient, what has the committee prioritized looking at to cut in order to properly fund that line as an unknown? And then just sort of generally speaking, I just kind of wanted to make a comment, and that's that it's obviously really clear that there's been, a very thorough accounting of this year's costs. And I think that, the budget tracking sheet that Bill has pulled together and Ms. Cresta is obviously incredibly helpful. And I think, it speaks to the fact that there's always sort of improvements and iterations that happen every year as different, leadership teams come on board. And I hope that that's sort of a tool that continues, because I think it's really enlightening. I guess my concern is a lot of what was discussed tonight is very tactical and it's not strategic. And I really hope that the school committee takes the time to sort of just discuss overall their philosophies regarding the budget, because from my perspective, we are in a very similar place with, puts and takes as we have been in years past. And from my perspective, at least the two prior administrations, which are the only two administrations that I work with specifically, so I can speak to personally, all realize the same challenges with the operating budget. And I still feel like we continue to kind of kick the can down the road in that regard. So I really want to understand where the committee sits on that, and sort of give John Bucky a really good sense of kind of what he's coming into in terms of, what the school committee is going to be advocating for. That's in the best interest of students, because some of these challenges that you made with cuts, like particularly the curriculum coach at Village and the principals not taking COLA increases, I think are not only morale issues, but they also begin to impact student services directly. And with a budget this tight, my sort of broader question that I hope that you guys cover off on as well is, at what point does this budget begin to impact student services directly if other cuts need to be made to close that gap between where you're currently at and where the town is at? Thanks.
Bill, do you have any follow-up on that?
No, the one thing about the unanticipated cost line, just a general number, frankly, to be honest with you, thinking about what some additional cost around personnel may be, some part-time custodians, how that may work. We think, we may be able to look at the possibility of the part-time van drivers that we will hire, give them a few more hours, especially during the day between when school starts and when school ends. That's a possibility to address some of the areas that actually Jeff brought up. So, again, we're kind of flying, blind here at the time being, for the time being.
Thanks, Bill. Katie Martin, you have another question?
I do, and I actually wrote it in the chat, but I can read it. We know that some student services were given remotely during the remote learning time that we've been going through, but speech and language pathology was not one of them. So is there an assumption that there will be compensatory services for all of the lack of speech and language services this fall? This spring, next fall?
So my understanding, Katie, is that, there's a process that we'll go through. We'll work with parents on that. We do estimate that there will be the need for compensatory services. And one of the things that we've been able to do, or we're anticipating to do when the federal grant is released, the application for the new FY21 IDA grant, we've been able to identify. I have to get back with Eric as to, but in the tens of thousands of dollars. That won't cover everything, but certainly we think there will be room in the IDA grant to cover some compensatory service costs. But that is a process that the teams will go through with parents. They'll identify what those services may be, and then a plan will be put into place. And I haven't talked to Eric about this. There may be an opportunity based on the guidance that just came out today, actually yesterday, from DESE on the extended school year, with an opportunity for some limited one-to-one, which speech language services may fit nicely into that. So there's a possibility, I think, that some of those services perhaps can start later in the summer if people are available, but that's something that would be determined through the team process.
So we didn't carry any specific compensatory services for the fall. It wasn't budgeted.
No, that's part of the unanticipated line, as well as the CARES Act. So the $100,000 CARES Act dollars can certainly go to compensatory services as well. That's an eligible expense.
So I think I would just reiterate Meredith's point that I'd like to hear from the school committee about how we're going to prioritize some of these items that's come up: technology, compensatory services, the cleaning and facilities, because it looks like we have a couple buckets to pull from for a lot of different things that may have wide-ranging costs. Thank you.
So, Sarah?
Yes.
We're starting to get into, I'm taking notes as much as I can, but we're starting to get into, double-digit questions. So, at some point, do we want to?
Yeah, we'll get through people's questions, and then we'll close the hearing, and then we'll be able to talk as the school committee.
Okay. So
it's my understanding that part of the hearing is that the public actually can interact with the elected officials.
That's Bill, do you want to weigh in? That's not exactly how I understood it.
My experience is that the public hearing is for the public to comment, to ask questions. There's no specific rule about it regarding school committee members answering. it's not allowed. If that's what you've done in the past, then I don't see a problem with that.
So how do the other committee members want to?
I would like to recommend that we go through all the other questions first. I've been on the committee for 5 years now, and we've never responded to public comment during the budget hearing. That's not to say, Bill is responding to every question perfectly fine. And, members of this committee have participated in the budget development. So I think I'm perfectly fine having Bill speak, and at future meetings, if people want to come for public comment, and we will continue to have budget discussions. But I think Bill's doing a great job. I think there's 2 or 3 other people out there that still have questions that we should still hear.
I would like to hear the rest of the comments at least, and if we can get through everyone's feedback, and then I think maybe we have a chance to talk about it.
I mean, we sat through last year's meeting and didn't get into a public debate during the budget hearing. So it is usual and customary, but I'm open to change. But Bill, once again, has been doing an outstanding job, very thorough, very comprehensive, of answering everybody's questions. And I think the responses to his questions are consistent with everything that this committee has discussed, met, and talked about at previous school committee meetings in public, and in their subcommittee meetings that have been on Zoom meetings in public as well. So thank you for that, Bill. I think you're doing a great job.
So Erin?
So I think my point, I agree with that. My point was that some people have specifically asked for what school committee members' opinions are. So that's what I just wanted to make sure we had a chance to.
No, I've said that from the beginning, that we'll have a chance to talk about that tonight. We'll have a chance at the meeting that we posted for Wednesday. We'll have a chance at our next meeting before we vote on this. There's multiple times for us to continue to listen to public feedback and get public feedback and then respond. Erin Noonan? Erin, are you still on? All right, I'll circle back to Erin. She's got another.
No, I'm here. I'm sorry.
All right, go ahead.
I apologize. I was on mute.
No worries. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. No, I was just, this isn't my question, but I felt compelled to respond to that conversation, in that I heard from Bill that there's not real rules or guidelines about how this process works. And, as just a parent in the district, I think that this is unusual times that we're facing. There's a lot of unknowns. We haven't had budget. I mean, I wasn't going to bring this up, but we haven't had minutes posted. So I'm unclear where the committee members stand on some of these issues, because there just hasn't been available to the public some of the minutes that usually are posted on a regular basis. But that's not my question. It's just a comment. I think we are in a situation where we can have a town hall type of forum. I think we're in an unusual budget territory here. I think there's a lot of people, 111 people on this conversation. I think it would be nice to have a town hall, but it's not my decision. My question is, does this budget rely on full pre-K and kindergarten enrollment as a budget driver in the same way that it has in the last year before? Because I have to think that parents will be rethinking, if we have parents at home, whether or not, and we are going to go to some type of remote learning program, whether or not that is a financial investment or tuition that they are willing to pay. And if we haven't anticipated, a downturn in that full day kindergarten and pre-kindergarten tuition, what are we going to do to make up that loss? What are the priorities going to be made? Because my understanding is that over the past years, that's represented, I don't know, like a $500,000 worth of, line allocation of revenue for the district.
So I can answer that. So we have not fully taken that into account at this point, Erin. We are going back and looking at the numbers. We do have, we've talked about making an effort. We have heard from parents at this point, whether they plan to participate in the full day or not. I'm waiting for another update that I should have tomorrow. But we have, if that's the case, we currently have 2 kindergarten teacher vacancies because of retirement that we have not hired for yet. And so depending on what the information starts looking like the next couple of weeks, if we have more students than in previous years, enough students to make up a couple of full sections, then I see that it's conceivable that that we hire part-time teachers to just teach the not full day program.
So we're not
something we are looking at, but once again, we're waiting for a little more data.
Anything else, Erin?
I guess I had the thought too that, we are probably should be anticipating, and I don't know if this is something that has come up, that given the financial situation, the global financial situation, there will probably be some amount of increase in enrollment of private school students returning, particularly if the guidance from the state is that we are going to, even a 50% online enrollment. And I just, was hoping that that has been taken into consideration in the budget.
No, not fully at this point, no.
Alistair Connor?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So first, I just am concerned about the budget.
Alistair, you're on mute now.
Oh, there we go. Is that better? Someone muted me. Okay.
Yes.
Weird. So my first concern was regarding social emotional and whether there's a budget item that covers enough money for virus anxiety and social anxiety, considering the kids haven't seen each other for a very long time and they're wearing masks and it's hard to read each other. It's hard to read the teachers. And then if the kid next to me sneezes and I get all stressed out because I don't know if my mask is working or his mask is working, or, that's going to cause a lot of anxiety. And so I'm wondering if it covers that, but also training for the teachers about what to expect per age group for age appropriate concerns with anxiety, and a little extra preparation, because I did feel, we have an amazing kindergarten teacher, but I do feel that sometimes these things come up, especially this week with Black Lives Matter, or, that they weren't quite sure how to address it for that age group. And so I think some extra preparation for the teachers about how to handle the anxiety and the needs of the kids feeling anxious and how that's handled and where that is in the budget. My other concerns are many people in town's financial pictures have changed, and they may not. I'm also thinking I would have normally bought a Chromebook, an extra Chromebook, but maybe, if I don't have the income, I can't buy one and I need one. And also with the long-term Chromebook use or computer use, and if I go back to work, then I can't share my computer with one of the children long-term. So the need for more computers to be considered. I'm also concerned about Coffin being the school that has non-functioning windows and bad HVAC, the weakest of all the schools at this point in terms of air quality. I'm concerned about that, and the lack of AC and whether the schools are hot and the kids are wearing masks. You know, if we've considered bringing in AC units for September, or how are we going to handle that? I'm curious if you have explored the possibility of outdoor classroom use at all to resolve some of those issues and also allow for full class participation. You could have 21 kids 6 feet distance apart outside not wearing masks, whether you'd consider having porta potties and using public spaces around town to incorporate outdoor classroom use. And then my last comment is whether or not school nurses have been involved in the school budgeting, because there are things that I know I've heard from nurses, like the addition of no-touch trash cans, paper towel dispensers that don't have so much touch to them, increased trash from all the paper towels from all the hand washing, increased thermometers, and then looking at bottlenecks for when they're trying to take temperatures coming into classes, and just whether they've been a part of this budgeting process. Thank you.
Bill, you're muted.
So just a couple of responses in terms of the social, emotional, and staff training budget. So, you know, again, like I've said before, the direct cost of issues around, you know, social anxiety, virus anxiety, don't know what that would be, but that's under the unanticipated cost. In terms of training staff, you know, there's close to $100,000 budgeted across the district for professional development. And those will be discussions and some decisions that will have to get made, again, as the reopening plan is being finalized, and some professional development that may have been anticipated prior to school closure, you know, may have to be put off in place of training and professional development for directly related to the circumstances that we face now. But there is money in the budget, and it just may have to be reallocated. In terms of people's financial picture and technology, once again, the same answer. There is, you know, more than $160,000 in technology devices money that has been budgeted, and the original plan for how to use that may have to be put on hold, and a new plan for how to spend that money be put in place. So, you know, I think that's going to happen. In terms of Coffin air quality, you know, we did regular air quality checks at the Coffin School throughout the year, right up until school closure, and those air quality tests were good. We will engage in that process for school opening. There have been, my understanding, I know that there are some schools that we have done that regularly, and I think that would be important. We are doing all the preventative and annual work around replacing filters. We always do that. That may have to be stepped up. We'll see where that's going. I don't have an answer to the AC question. And outdoor classroom use, you know, that's certainly something to be considered. And school nurses, they'll be, you know, we will be getting them involved, and as well as other staff in certain components of the school reopening plan, so that we make sure that we have the consideration and advice of our staff who are the specialists in those areas. And I expect that the district will reach out to others, both within and without outside the school community, to help with that as needed and necessary.
Chris Stevens.
I'm sorry. I don't have a question. I don't know. I didn't realize I had my hand up.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Mr. O'Neill, did you want to, it looks like you've got a statement that you'd like to make?
I guess it just seems like, Sarah, that, you know, there's been a lot of discussion tonight, but nothing too new from last year that I can tell. And I look forward to having a, you know, more detailed discussion on, you know, where we go from here. It seems like this year's budget, a lot of work's been put into it, but we continue to be forced to do more with less. And, you know, I think it's time that we get together as a community and put a strategic plan in place and figure out where we go from here.
Thank you. Erin Noonan, did you have another comment?
I did. Thanks, Sarah. So I have, like everybody, some concern, like a lot of concerns, and a lot of it's based on unknowns. You know, we just don't know. But I've heard, like, I know that, and I've heard you and others on the committee talk about the social emotional needs of students that are going to be reentering the district. And I guess, like, I'm looking at, you know, for example, Village School, and there's 2 guidance counselors there right now. And maybe, I mean, I guess I have to direct this to our superintendent, but there's, you know, I don't know, what, 700 students at Village and 2 guidance counselors. It seems like that's an extremely high caseload of like 350 students to 1. And have we allocated resources in the fact that everyone's acknowledged that we are going to be anticipating increased social emotional needs? And I guess we're going to go back to the bucket of money from the COVID fund, but it seems that there's a lot of stuff going into the bucket. So have we prepared for the increase in social emotional needs due to COVID, not including the guidance counselor at Glover, which I know we were already planning on?
Eric, so there are actually 3 full-time guidance counselors at Village?
Well, my understanding is that Kara splits between, I'm sorry, we have 1 guidance counselor for the 3rd grade who spends time between, for 3rd grade right now because of the transition plan. But are there more than 2 guidance counselors for 4, 5, and 6?
No, there are 2.
Right. So that's a lot of students for, and it's been the same every year. And if we're talking about increases in these needs that are going to come up like next year, and we've just kind of been level funding this job and we talk a lot about it, like I just wonder, where are we going to put, have we made any decisions this year about allocating resources in that area?
Not specifically, no.
I appreciate your honesty, Bill. Thank you. My next question regarding special education. We know that there is a backlog of students who need, or at least in my own household, I have 2 pending evaluations from this year for my 2 students who are in special education services. So, and I can only imagine that carries over in conversation, you know, just with what I've heard from, you know, our great director of student services, that we do have a backlog. And I have to imagine we're going to be kind of needing to add to these assessments and testings and evaluations as we do try to re-enter next year for students who have been out of school, who will have been out of school, I want to say for 5 or 6 months at that point. So we will probably, or ideally should be doing reassessments for these students. And I guess I'm wondering, like, have we thought within the budget about where we're going to add additional funding for the purposes of these new assessments that we're going to be needing? And, you know, I guess somebody had chimed in on it, but about, you know, like, what happens when we're asking for compensatory services, you know, next year? I know this is a difficult question, and I know that there's maybe not answers, but I feel like obligated to ask the question.
Well, I do have an answer. It's a partial answer, Erin. And
Oh, thank you.
so Eric and I have been talking about this. He has started to formulate a plan. Right now, there is a backlog of evaluations that have to be completed. But our hope is, under this plan, that we'll be able to complete and catch up on all of these evaluations through the summer, so that we'll be able to start. Typically in a school year, you open a school year and you have a backlog of cases. But it appears that there are staff who are interested in working to complete these evaluations. And so the plan and the hope is that we would complete all of the backlog of evaluations for the summer. If people are available, we'll be able to hold meetings during the summer. And the idea behind the plan is to actually start the year with no backlog, which would put us ahead of where we typically are. So, you know, Eric has some ideas about how that is going to work. You know, we believe we have, given that the extended school year is going to be modified. You know, we budgeted for a full extended school year, so we believe there's money in that extended school year budget to help with that. But I know Eric is working with his team to still iron out the details. So, you know, from that aspect of your question, we are hoping that there will be a plan in place that we'll be able to follow through on, and at least be in a much better position at the beginning of the year. You know, that doesn't address the question that you brought up, and that was brought up earlier in terms of other services, compensatory services. But, you know, those are typically cases that are dealt with on an individual basis, individual IEP basis. And the teams meet and they determine what is required. And so, you know, that's how our plan is to address that. And
I guess I just want to know from you if you feel that we're not perpetuating an unfunded mandate around the services that, you know, our special education students are going to need next year.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I guess I just want to make I don't know that is it that it's in the budget that we have the needs to do that. I know you were talking about working for the summer. Is that something, and maybe I don't know.
No, we believe we have money in the extended year budget to accomplish that.
Okay, and then thank you for indulging me, but I just have like one more question. I just want to clarify, because I really have appreciated your absolute, like, perpetual honesty and openness, and as we're kind of rounding out your tenure here in Marblehead, like, I think I can speak for many people that we've very much appreciated the service that you have provided here. And I guess I just wanted to kind of clarify, because I just wanted to clarify for my own understanding, but I believe that I had heard you two explain at a prior meeting recently that any further cuts to this budget would affect student services. And I just was going to ask you to reconfirm that that was my understanding.
Well, my sense is yes. I mean, you know, we can go back and I suppose we can look at, you know, supply lines item again. You know, it will be based on, you know, how you determine you know, there's kind of a hierarchy of impact on student services, right? So is it a direct service by an individual, or are we talking about, you know, those areas on the margin of perhaps supplies, materials, equipment that, you know, maybe you can get through one more year, you know, without, you know, a certain piece of equipment, the equipment that you're going to replace, you know, maybe you can band-aid it together. So it would require, you know, a thorough review. The quick down and dirty way to do it would be just to lay off staff. You know, I would think we would want to try to avoid that, of course, because that's the hierarchy where it has the most impact, you know, on student services. So, you know, I think, again, we're all experiencing this for the first time. I wish I could tell you that I'm going to, you know, reach back and draw upon my 22 years of experience and say, I've got the answer. I have to tell you, it's frustrating as heck, I don't. But, you know, my understanding is that there will be a need for a fall town meeting. And, you know, sorry, town fathers, for bringing this up, but as we get into the school year, if we find that, you know, things have just gone crazy and out of control, and there needs to be a supplemental funding, you know, that would be the opportunity you know, from my perspective, you know, that would be the possibility of additional funding. You know, the piece that's still hanging out there, and I don't, you know, who knows with the way, with what's happening across our country now, but, you know, I was of the opinion, you know, just 10 days ago that there will be a supplemental federal, you know, relief package earmarked for states and municipalities directly, like there was back in 2008. And, you know, those are funds that, if they are realized, I think will help considerably. And all the more reason, you know, to have a fall town meeting where those funds could be accessed. So, you know, I know that's not probably the answer you wanted to hear, but, you know, that's my thinking right now on that.
No, I mean, I think I agree. I think that I think all of us have concerns that the CARES Act and the $135,000 that we budgeted will not be enough for the cleaning, the technology, and all the unknowns that you outlined well in the presentation. And so I guess just my final question is to the school committee that I would like to see in the following discussion is how are you as the school committee going to prioritize the cuts that are going to need to be made, possibly, given all the uncertainties?
Okay, so that, I don't have anybody else who has any comments or questions. So I will go ahead and close the public hearing portion of this at 9:20 p.m. And I'm going to see if I can, Bill, can you stop sharing your?
Can we close the hearing and keep going? It's the only thing on the agenda. Don't we have to keep it open?
We can close the public hearing from how I understand it. We can close the public hearing and then the school committee can continue a discussion. So, so now we can open it.
I believe that's right.
Thanks, Bill. John, I saw you shaking your head as well. So we can now discuss as a school committee. I know Sarah, you had obviously, you know, put your hand up first, so I'll let you comment.
Okay, a few things jumped out at me, and I agree with Bill. This process has been followed very closely. We've had lots of meetings, lots of discussion. I think the curveball for me was the letter that came out from DESE late Friday night, like 7 o'clock, with some of these, what people keep referring to as unfunded mandates. So we really haven't had a chance to talk about the impact of those. So I think those are my biggest issue. The first one being, in that letter, it states no more than 10 children can be in a room at any given time. When you look at the enrollment numbers that we just put up, the majority of our classes are in excess of a 20-to-1 ratio, which means we're not, if we're week on, week off, max 10 kids in a class, math would say it's a max of a 20-to-1 ratio to meet the mandates from the state. So my concern is those ratios aren't meeting that 20-to-1. So are we mandated to add staff in order to meet this mandate from DESE? And how do we add staff when we're actually talking about about possibly needing to cut staff? So that's one of my questions. If we want to just talk about that one, I can follow up with the other one.
Well, I want to jump in, and I sat through too much last year of cutting staff kind of rumors and everything. So that has not actually been something that we have discussed in any way, shape, or form. And so that's not where
Bill just said it 5 minutes ago, Sarah.
Right, but Bill said that kind of when pressed of like, where would these things come from? If if this, then that, then this other thing. And I do not want to go down that hole again. Like that's
no, fair enough. But I just want to
having heard from it a million times last year over this, oh, we're gonna have to cut staff, we're gonna have to cut staff, and I'm not going down that wormhole again. Not doing it.
And
I refuse.
I would
to
agree,
allow
and we
our
heard
staff
Bill
to
answer 3 or 4
that.
questions about the additional supplemental funds that are coming from
They're not
state funding and everything else. So.
Okay, circling back to my original question, my concern is we're not meeting that ratio of the 10-to-1 that is a state mandate. How are we going to address that? Obviously, that money needs to come from somewhere. I'm not saying, the pot from the town is fixed. The town as a whole is in a very precarious situation, and I'm very sympathetic to that. They're making their own cuts. Their department, departments all over town are in a hard spot, and I am like many of us very sympathetic to that. However, as a school committee member, I just want to make sure that our numbers are reflective of achieving that mandate from the state.
Sarah, can I just jump in?
Yes, please do.
Sarah Fox, thanks. We need to remember though, that guidance that came out late Friday was just for summer services. So we don't know yet, until we see the DESE plan, what the impact, what the parameters will be for the fall. And my understanding is that, again, that will be subject to change based on the metrics that the governor has been using. And that's what DESE has been following. So I totally get your concern, but I had to read that a couple of times myself. But that's just related to the summer programming right now.
Okay. Do we think that those new regulations will be out for the June 15th release? I know there's no crystal ball, but is that your assumption?
Well, my hope is that when the DESE plan comes out, that there will be, we were told it will be comprehensive and it will have details. So I assume those are the kind of details that it will include. One can only hope.
Okay, thank you. And then one quick line item that didn't work out with my math from Friday's meeting was we had talked about the estimate for PPE being townwide, I think $370,000.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who said it, and I don't want to misquote who it was, but I think the estimation was about 80% of that would be needed for the schools.
It was about $300,000.
Yeah, so about $300,000, and on the line item, we are getting 180 of the roughly. I think you noted 180 of the CARES Act money to cover that.
No, I indicated there was $1.8 million coming to the town.
Yeah, and then right below it, you wrote in parentheses 180 to the schools for PPE. That it might have just been a typo.
It must have been a typo. I don't. That must have been a mistake.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure.
The conversations that we've had with the town is that we're hopeful, you know, given the amount of money that we believe PPE plus some other costs, you know, will be covered.
Thank you very much, Bill.
I'll go back and look at that, Sarah. Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Jen, you got your hand up?
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, great, thanks. So I have a couple of things. Actually, I have a couple of questions and then some comments that I'll make. The first actually is to you, Bill, and that is just kind of a in the weeds thing. The math curriculum that you talked about with Go Math, right? We have a line item there to get us through to keep that whatever we need for the 2015 version. But my understanding is we would need to be implementing a new curriculum in FY22.
So the plan now is to put, you know, have the math study group start this summer for reviewing and starting the process of identifying possible programs that would be piloted in the fall with enough time to get the appropriate feedback from staff for due diligence to be done, and then still to have time to be able to include it in an FY22 budget.
Okay, so that was my question. So the idea would be we would do the working groups this year in FY21, and it would be then a budget item for FY22.
That's the plan as it stands now.
Is there any cost associated with those study groups? Are there stipends or anything that go along with that?
Yeah, typically there's either summer work pay at $33 an hour or for increment credit.
Okay, and has that been budgeted?
Yeah, that's part of the staff development summer budget.
Okay, great.
It likely will be paid, will be able to be paid from one of our title grants.
Great, perfect, thank you. The next question I actually have really is probably for both you and Michelle. So a few folks, Erin and some other folks have been asking us, you know, where we're going to find funds if we have these unforeseen costs that do overrun our revenue. So I think that it's, you know, I don't want to sound like I'm wimping out here, but I think that from my perspective as a school committee member, it's hard to sit here and talk about where we would make changes for based on hypothetical and unforeseen additional costs and running out of revenue in different buckets. It's hard to sort of do that. But so I think from what, you know, where I sit, the question is, what do you, if you were here, because we can't ask John because he's not able to answer that, but, you know, between you and Michelle, how would you envision a process? So in other words, if you were sitting in this seat on July 1st and by, you know, October 1st, we are looking at some difficult financial situation, how would you envision that kind of process going between you and Michelle, the business manager, finance manager, prioritizing or making recommendations? Because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it would likely be a recommendation by the administration as to how we would overcome those costs or revenue shortfall.
If we needed to look at that once the school year started, that's your question.
Correct.
Right. So what I would do is I would involve the leadership team, bring the leadership team together. Michelle and I would have, talked about some ideas, but we bring the leadership team together, we lay out what the issue is, and, we try to work as a team to identify areas that would have, as we've talked about before, the least impact on direct student services, and develop a rationale for, each idea that's put on the table. And then to put that together, it probably would mean more than, 1 or 2 meetings, but giving people an opportunity to perhaps go back, share it with, talk to either key staff or some staff about that, put together some different scenarios, and then bring those back to the school committee with either, might be a first pass of, does the school committee have a certain, sense of prioritizing different scenarios? I want to hear your feedback, and then if you were ready to make a decision on one of those, fine. But if not, you needed more information, we go back to the team and, tweak things, and then come back with a final recommendation. That's how I would envision the process happening. When we look for, part of that process would be, maybe there are outside resources we can look at. Maybe there's, grant funding from various organizations that we typically might not, think about or think to reach out to. And then it would, and I guess the projected, can't think of the word, level of the problem, what we talking, how much money are we talking about? And then that may, if it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, then that kind of limits your options. But that's how I would see that process working.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I think that's important for folks out there to, to understand how that will work. I also think that from my perspective, it will be important for us to be, really monitoring this, the costs on a, a pretty, whether it's a daily basis or a weekly basis. If we start seeing things, and I know Michelle will be doing this, we get a monthly update report, budget report. But I think if we are, closely watching these expenditures, if things start to escalate in a short period of time, intra-month or whatever, that we're sort of on this early, right? Because it could happen. It could be a escalating cost situation or not. I don't see it as a slow drip. I think it's probably going to be fast, if that's any prediction.
Yeah, I think one of the one of the tools that will help, though, Jen, in that regard, will help the school committee, certainly will help the administration, is that with the 2 new practices of encumbering salaries and then requiring all purchases to be done through a purchase order, which then results in encumbrance. What that will help with is, on a regular basis, weekly, you can run an expenditure report and you'll know exactly where you stand.
That's great.
So, those will be in place. So that'll give you more real-time information.
Okay.
Than we have the ability to do now.
Do you know, there was a question earlier about air quality that came up, and I know you had addressed it, that we've dealt with it before and we'll deal with it again. Is that something, if we're looking at air quality, real time, based on trying to keep these rooms as fresh as possible, is that something that can be applied to the CARES Act?
Say that last part again, Jen.
Could we apply the costs of maintaining and measuring air quality to the CARES Act? Would that be able to do that?
I don't know. It's possible. The list of eligible expenses some are very clear, some are not so much. What what DOR has asked communities to do, if they have questions about certain expenditures, is to ask the Division of Local Services representative about that, and then they will provide an answer. I know that, I know Jason has already done that for, has a list that already was submitted to clarify.
Okay.
For that purpose. But that resource is available as well.
Okay, great. And then I'll just close with this, and then I'll be done. Someone, I think it was Aaron or someone had asked earlier, you know, sort of what is our philosophy, or what are school committee members' philosophy? And I think that that's a fair question. And I think that we've talked about this, I think, a lot this year, that we had talked about last year, you know, coming in and trying to, you know, build a zero-based budget and work together to do that. We weren't able to do it for a whole host of reasons. And of course, now with the COVID, I mean, everything is, you know, just turned upside down. I do think, though, that coming into the new fiscal year in July, we're going to have to walk and chew gum at the same time, right? So we're going to be managing this, you know, real time, tenuous budget situation. But I also think it's an opportunity, and you've spoken to this, that when John comes in, that we take the time, you know, pretty much out of the gate to, you know, basically throw everything out, start from the base, and work with our administrators and the great team that we have in central admin to build, you know, a zero-based budget, to build a budget based on what do we need, what do we really need to deliver to these students in Marblehead. This came up in the interview process. What does a graduate of Marblehead look like? And so you know, to answer that's what I believe is what we need to be doing sort of philosophically next year. And so that whatever that looks like, and whatever we get to that number, which, you know, maybe sometime over the winter, early spring, you know, how we pay for that, you know, that's a whole different story. And that's where we, you know, have to work with the town side and talk about that. But it's
Jen, hold on, you got muted.
Yeah, how does that happen? Someone.
Wasn't me.
You all want to mute me. I know you do.
So, Jen.
Anyway, I'm getting off my soapbox, but that's,
no.
I think
but
that's
just,
you know, where I think we need to.
Yeah, in terms of the zero-based budget, there's one step that you need to take first. And that is, the committee will need to have a discussion, and you probably want to involve the finance committee and the liaisons as well. A very clear understanding of the definition of building a zero-based budget needs to be put in writing, because zero-based budget means different things to different people. I would, as an aside, I would argue that a large part of our budget for FY21 proposed is a zero-based budget, because we have identified every single personnel. We know exactly what they'll be earning. We have identified all of our known special education costs, and we did that again from the ground up, going back to you know, everyone who is on a, you know, is involved and who may be coming off, and clearly identified them. And then we did a similar thing for utilities. There's a lot more work to do, of course, but in those big components of the budget, you know, I would argue from one definition of zero-based budgeting, you know, that we did at least start that process this year. But, you know, I think that the first step is very important, that everybody has to be on the same page as to what that means.
Thank you.
And Bill, I appreciate that clarification, because I agree with you that we did do a pretty darn decent job at building a zero-based budget. You know, I think what we are now moving into is creating a needs-based budget. And so, you know, we know now where we stand, what we have as the priorities. And, you know, when you came in last year, the school committee had set forth a list that we all created together of priorities to cover through the year. And that, I think, is where you built that zero-based budget from, because obviously, staff was one of those top priorities. And so I think as we move into next year, that's where we sort of find ourselves, is that now we're going to task with really, kind of shoring up any loose ends on that zero base, but then creating a needs-based budget, it seems like. And then that is what we go forward with in looking at that new strategic plan that John's going to create. And that's what the school committee is then using as we look at, the override that I think we all kind of know is needed. There's never been much doubt about that. It's just been this whole idea that to kind of, again, quote an overused phrase, this kicking the can down the road. I mean, the can had been kicked down the road for years and years and years. And when you got here, it had to be, it was a disaster. And so you spent, and the rest of the administration has spent the year really cleaning that up. And the school committee has been able to now better understand, as opposed to last year when we sat in these seats where, we couldn't figure out what was up and what was down. And we were getting different answers to the same question every time it was asked. And so now we've got a list of answers to our questions, and, COVID notwithstanding, because I think, that's one of those pieces that, again, like you said, we're going to just have to continue to monitor very closely. And now we dig in with John and we figure out how to really meet the needs of this district and move us forward. And, that kind of, that's my thoughts on some of the questions that were asked of the school committee this evening. David, you got your hand up. I'm sorry, I kind of jumped in.
No problem. Thanks. So I'll just go back to the first commentary about, we've heard over and over and over again, these are uncharted waters. I think we know that state government and federal government is doing their darndest to support everyone, whether it's the people who are out of work, whether it's schools, whether it's state governments. $1.8 million for the town, additional supplemental funding that this town will collectively work through. But one thing that got left out of that conversation and commentary, and I'm glass half full, I hope we don't have COVID-19 savings. We just ended the year from March 13th to now, where we're projecting that $300,000 came from COVID savings because we had less than full schools, because we didn't have spring sports, because we didn't have activities going on in the schools related to transportation that cost money. So I don't want to see this, but I think in all of these assumptions that we're making, that if we have less than full schools, there's going to be other activities that we're not going to be spending money on, whether it's utilities or light or electricity, or unfortunately other events that might not be allowed to take place in the schools. So some of those educational needs might be balanced by cuts that we all realized and saw since March 15th when we had to shutter our schools. So I don't want to count on those, and I hope we don't need them, and that we can be moving forward. But if we are in that situation, I think the reality is some of those expense reductions, I don't want to call them savings, because we're not saving, we're just not spending on what we need to be spending it on. It'll be expense reductions will continue. The second thing about zero-based, I agree. I think maybe at the summer retreat, it would be a good opportunity to just, define this, because when I look at the methodology that Bill put in place when he came in, to right the ship, we knew we had a mess in special education. And that was the first step. So we looked at all the special education funding, the supplemental fund that comes from the town. How was it being accounted for? How are we budgeting for it? What was unanticipated? Eric Oxford and his staff have done an excellent job. So I think right there, we went beyond a zero-based budget by looking at our special ed costs and getting a grip on them, because it was clear with the $700,000 deficit that we incurred by paying invoices with monies from 2019 for expenses in 2018, we didn't have a grip on our special education cost. And we do now. So that's the first thing when it comes to a zero-based budget. We are in a much, much better place, although it remains, as we all know, based on information we've received in the last couple months, very unpredictable, but I think we've done the best we can. The second item is, we did add, let's not forget, this is the first superintendent we've had in my tenure to admit that we have a declining enrollment. We had a superintendent who did not want to admit that we had declining enrollment when we were trying to build a new elementary school. We wanted to build an elementary school that was 99,000 square feet, and we're building a school that's 82,000 square feet. Declining enrollment is real, and thankfully this administration has recognized that. And as Bill mentioned, through attrition, we have not had to, lay people off. We have not had to cut positions, but we strategically look at those opportunities that have arisen when teachers retire, or when there is the wave of classes moving through, as Bill pointed out in enrollment. How can we move teachers to follow those students to balance the enrollment? But we never had that transparency. So I think we've done an excellent job there. I want to credit Bill, John Moretti, his entire staff, the principals who've been involved in this entire budget process that goes, once again, in my mind, way beyond zero, because we looked at those kinds of things. The other item is, we added the extra teacher, Matt Fox. This budget allowed for, with those kinds of adjustments, Matt Fox recognized there was a class size challenge at Vets. So pre-COVID, we were adding another teacher at Vets. Pre-COVID, we were adding the curriculum coach at Village. Pre-COVID, we're adding another guidance counselor at Glover. So this budget did a lot of things that went beyond, in my mind, the definition of a zero-based budget. So I agree, we can talk about what the definition of that is and work more closely on that. And then are there things beyond what we all know? A lot of work has been done on facilities and what needs to be done for our capital plan, and we recognize there will need to be some more comprehensive work that's been started by people, and we need to look at that. So I don't disagree that, we need to continue to work on these things, but we've accomplished a heck of a lot since last March. And pre-COVID, we're trying to be team players with what's happening on the state level with the reductions in state funding. And I just want to recognize, I think everybody's done an outstanding job. So thank you for everyone who's been involved. And it's challenging, and we recognize that we don't have all of the answers. They continue to change, but I'm confident that we have the staff and the administration, and quite honestly, we have a great team effort working with the town that will pull through this. We're going to be able to do this. So thank you for my time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
David. Megan, we haven't heard from you. Did you want to add anything?
David just kind of stole my thunder, to be honest. I do agree with everything that everyone said, to be honest. And I first just want to thank Bill for putting this presentation together and talking for an hour and a half in great detail. And I hope the community, has learned a lot. And also thank the community for participating. I think having over 100 parents and community members listen in and, try to digest all the information and provide real constructive feedback is imperative to this process. So I'm very happy, maybe that's one of the silver linings of going virtual, is that we can have more participation. So I think that, I think all the feedback has been really useful, and I appreciate it. I think, I don't want to repeat things that people have said, but, being one of the budget liaisons, this is the unknowns and how we're going to fund it. That is what we talk about every single time we get together, both internally and with the town. And there are unknowns, and there will continue to be unknowns. I think the key for us is, obviously DESE is going to provide a whole set of guidance and guidelines that we're going to have to most likely follow. So we do have a little bit of a waiting game until that information comes out. And I think also we have to work with our parents and our staff and our families to figure out what that's going to mean for them come September. You know, so who can and cannot or will not, you know, be physically in our buildings. And that's a piece of information that we still need to gather. And so yes, there are unknowns. It is something that we talk about not daily, but pretty much. And right now we've got some areas where we know 100% we've got funding and we've got that set aside. And as we continue to flesh out what the plan will look like, then we have to continue to be flexible and creative. And most importantly, work with our town counterparts to figure out as a community, how are we going to address our needs? So I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that this is something that we are talking about on a regular basis. But yes, there are still unknowns and we need to continue to flesh those out. And I think I'll stop there for now. I know that we're going to meet on Wednesday. I know you guys know this at this point, but I really like to think about and process everything I've heard here today. And so, you know, I'll definitely have more to say on Wednesday as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Totally agree on that point. Sarah, you've got your hand up.
Yes. So 2 points that were brought up that I just found in my notes that I wanted to circle back to. The point about kindergarten tuition and that it very, very likely will not hit that $500,000. I think that was the driver that we used. Bill, do you suggest that we be, and I may be off by a little bit, I just kind of did the math of the tuition by most of the enrollment. But Bill, would you recommend that we maybe be a little more conservative with that so we're setting ourselves up for success? I mean, it's probably better to plan in the beginning rather than, you know, try to, you know, rob Peter to pay Paul later on. I hadn't really thought about that kindergarten tuition piece, which is shame on me as a kindergarten parent. But I know this year that was a big discussion topic among parents where they felt once they were into distance learning, they wanted to actually, you know, no longer do the tuition. And well, I'm glad many still did. I'm just wondering, should we be conservative into our budget number for that?
Bill, you're muted.
I don't have an answer for you right now, Sarah. I want to have an opportunity to talk to Michelle about that. I did just look it up. We're projecting $529,000. That is yeah, so yeah, I want to talk to Michelle. I want to take a look to see what other alternatives there might be. Perhaps there might be an opportunity to bridge that gap somewhat for a year, but yeah, we can talk more about it on Wednesday. I'll be
okay. And then when you talked about the transportation, that could be a potential driver, I 100% agree with you that I don't have a huge concern that our in-district kids, that's going to be a huge problem. We have such a limited transportation and bus system within the town that I think if anything, it will be minimal. But is there a point, and maybe Michelle might know this answer, or you may, is there a point that our transportation contractors for out-of-district placements are required to give us their rates and or estimates and lock them in, or is that a moving target?
No, they lock them in per year. I don't know where we are in that process. I'll have to find the answer to that, but no, the rates get locked in every year.
Okay, and then if if we haven't locked them in yet, can we try to do that before we bring forward this budget? Just I know in some years that's been almost $1 million driver. So is it possible we can push them to lock them in sooner, or we don't have that wiggle room?
I don't know the answer to that question. I have to find
Okay.
it.
All right, no problem. I know I just threw these at you, and I apologize
Yeah.
for that.
But you know, our original budget was approximately $700,000. We are saving 46,000 or so, so it's down to, you know, the 650. We'll have a conversation with Eric about that.
Okay. I just want to, I know you said if we had to, we could change something at town meeting, but I think the ideal for us in the town is not to do that. I don't see an influx of cash coming into the town between now and in the fall, and if we
Right.
can get it right the first time, I think that's
Just so everybody's clear, if we are going to make an adjustment in the kindergarten tuitions, if we're going to look at transportation and make some kind of adjustment, the money is going to have to come from somewhere in this $40,521,000.
in our budget. No, I understand that. I just was looking for some suggestions for you because you've worked with the budget so much this year that we maybe, if it's your and Michelle's suggestion that those numbers might be able to get more accurate, that we make those adjustments now with your guidance where you have this historical knowledge from this year.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely take a look at all of that. So we're going to look at K tuition. I'm going to get I'm going to find out, because now I need to know that answer for the special ed transportation. I could be wrong. I think those rates are already set, and that's what our estimates are based on.
And obviously look at pre-K too, because I wonder if a lot of parents might avoid the pre-K thing altogether. I know personally my family, we're just skipping pre-K next year.
Yeah, we'll look at that. We haven't heard any of that, frankly, yet. Maybe it's coming. We actually are adding an afternoon session.
Oh, that's good.
We'll be able to take in up to eight students at no additional cost for staffing. So.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Okay.
So I actually have just one more point that I want to address, and I think, you know, everyone can feel free to hop onto it, but I think it was sort of a question or a statement addressed to me, being the mental health professional / school counselor of the group. And that is kind of, you know, that social emotional piece for next year. And, you know, I don't know exactly how we are going to address all of that. You know, I am the school counselor for Tower, and I'm there 10 hours a week, and I'm it. And so, you know, what I can say from my own personal experience is that we all do what we need to do. And we all work to meet the needs, and school professionals, whether you're talking about teachers or support staff or school psychologists, you know, we have the things that are on our daily lists, but then we figure out how to meet all of those additional needs as well. And I think, you know, there's I feel somewhat of a hidden conversation in the background going on of the coming crisis with mental health professionals. And, you know we have a shortage. We know mental health is relatively inaccessible in this country. And so I think, you know, the concern is certainly valid. I share it. I think, you know, one of the pieces that we just need to know is that our kids are going to be supported not just by the school counselors, but that our teachers do a whole lot of social emotional support as well. And we've got a new assistant superintendent coming in who is going to be able to help on those lines and get the PD out to our teachers. And that we can't forget that kids are resilient as well, and that the professionals who work with kids in all capacities work on building resiliency, whether it's, you know, how to get through a playground fight, you know, over tag, or a frustration on a math problem. And so I think, you know, it's certainly, we should be concerned and we should be looking to address additional social emotional needs, because we know they're going to be there. They've already been there, quite frankly, throughout remote learning. But I think we have to think a little bit more outside the box on that too, as just, you know, it's not just the school counselors or the school psychs who are going to be doing that work. So, you know, that at this point, I'm sure I'll have more to say on that. But at this point, that's my thoughts in regards to that question / statement / concern. Does anybody else have anything from the committee that they want to add? All right, Bill, do you have any closing remarks? Or are you just done?
No.
I actually had my hand up. I was just waiting for you to call on me, Sarah.
Oh, sorry, Sarah. I thought I hadn't put it down earlier.
Is there an availability of some of the CARES Act money to potentially find, and I'm sure that they're out there in an abundance right now, a professional development that kind of focuses on maximizing outcomes from distance learning? We know we'll be in distance learning in some type of hybrid format in the fall. And could we utilize some of those funds to provide, you know, this professional development potentially over the summer, and therefore also I think we'd probably contractually have to stipend our employees for that. And could we also possibly find one about, you know, trauma awareness, just to kind of bolster them in those two areas and give them the tools that are going to set them up for success as well? So I think we definitely, you know, that's our staff, if possible.
I'll have to go back and check. I'm pretty sure that the CARES Act money we get, the schools get directly, that $100,000, you know, can be used for anything as long as we can show it's directly related to, you know, dealing with issues around from COVID-19. We'll double check that.
All right. I think that's it for tonight. You know, we do have another meeting set up for Wednesday evening. You know, I think there's been a little bit of concern amongst the community that that's gonna, you know, we're gonna completely change our path from tonight. It's a meeting that we're gonna just hash out a few pieces to address that you know, are concerns from the community. So I think, you know, it's just an ongoing conversation from this, and that there are no huge pivots planned as far as I know. So, you know, everyone is encouraged to tune in again. You know, obviously, like Megan said, this is another silver lining. It's just sort of the ease in which we can participate and watch these meetings. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of address that. So just want to thank yeah.
Do you know when do you anticipate school committee voting?
I believe that vote is set, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, that vote is set for the next school committee meeting. Is that the 19th?
Oh, so it's after the FinCom meeting. Okay, I wasn't sure. Okay.
Yes.
Correct.
All right, got it.
The next day.
Yeah. So the 18th, sorry, I misspoke. The Thursday the 18th. So the kind of the final regularly scheduled school committee meeting of our year, of our school year. So yeah, so that's where we'll be at. And hopefully we see almost everybody back on this Wednesday for the conversation. And John Bucky, it was great to see you. Kind of great to have your presence here. Thanks for joining us. We look forward, obviously, to seeing much more of you in the coming weeks. So yeah, with that, I will adjourn us at 10:05 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Thank
Bill.
you. Good night.
Thanks, John.
Nice to join you.